Welcome to the Time Capsule Show, where we explore the meaning of life in the 21st century through the eyes of people just like you and me. I'm Joerenz.
And I'm Joenrhuz.
And today we have a junior doctor specializing in psychiatry and YouTuber, Dr. Elliott Carthy. Welcome, Elliot.
No, thank you so much for having me. Your American listeners might not know what the term junior doctor means, because it's kind of a UK thing, but I'm basically the equivalent of, I think, a resident is what you'd call it in the States.
Got it. Yeah, we were talking about that before the interview, actually, and I'm like, I'm not familiar with that. He might be a resident.
It's basically the same thing. So in the UK, they use the term junior doctor for anybody that isn't a consultant or attending. So junior doctors are anything from like their first day out of med school to like being 8 or 9 years down the line as doctors, but just not quite yet the boss. So it's a bit of a misleading and a bit of an annoying term, but that's what it is.
Oh man.
I see. So what made you want to get into medicine?
Oh God, that takes me back a little bit. I think so. I was fascinated with the human body and the science of the human body, particularly the extremes of what the body can do. And I think medicine's the best place to be hands-on and to see that really from top to toe. I think the other thing that helps with it is it's a secure profession that ends up having a good salary as well, despite the debt you get into originally. And there's a lot of roles for things like advocacy, and there's a lot of flexibility in the field as well. So I at first, because I didn't do chemistry and biology at the end of school, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to get into med school with that. Turns out you can. But I originally thought I was going to go down like a physio route or something to do with the human body that maybe I could do without chemistry. But then I found that you could go into medicine, and I ended up doing a biomedical science degree first and then doing medicine after. So like spending about 75 years at university and getting into too much debt before getting to the end.
So how was the process for becoming a doctor? Because I know in the US, it's like 4 years undergrad, 4 years of medical, and then however like residence experience you need before, depending on the profession that you choose, a specialization.
So most people with medicine in the UK will go straight from school. So you'll finish school at like 18, and then you'll go to med school, which is 5 or 6 years. So you'll qualify 23, 24 years old. I did it the long way. So I did a biomedical science degree first, and then I went back and I did a shortened version of a medical degree because I'm a graduate, and so you can kind of skip bits of it because you kind of already done it in your first degree, which was 4 years rather than 5 or 6. So I ended up spending 7.5 years at university or something silly like that. So I was 25 when I qualified. And then when you start out, you do 2 years, they're called your foundation years, and you do a bit of everything in those 2 years. You do a bit of general medicine, a bit of surgery, maybe a bit of general practice, pediatrics, emergency medicine, and then you choose what to specialize in. And the length of time after that can vary. So if you want to do general practice, I think it's family medicine is what it's called in the States. That's another 3 years. That's probably the shortest that you can do. And then if you want to be a surgeon, it can be like another 6 or 7 years at least. If not more, actually. I think it's even more than that now. I think it's just extended the training a little bit. It's like 7 or 8 years, I think. For psychiatry, it's another 6 years. So it takes you 8 years after medical school to become a consultant or attending. So to be finally specialized and recognized as a specialist. And I'm in my 5th year of that now. Yeah, 5th year.
Wow, so you don't have that much longer to go then.
It feels like ages. It feels like absolutely ages before it's are you a consultant yet and you get some freedom. But I'm at that point now where you choose what subspecialty within psychiatry that you want to do. So like, do you want to work with adults? Do you want to work with kids? Do you want to work, with older people? Do you want to work in therapy? But I'm going down the forensics route. So I'm doing forensic psychiatry.
Wait, so what does that mean? I've never heard of forensic psychiatry.
So it's treating mental illness in people that have offended in some way. So it's an interface really between the legal system and medicine and mental health. So you treat people in either secure psychiatric hospitals of varying different levels of security. So we've got like high, medium, and low, depending on how risky somebody is, and in prison settings for the most part. So you're treating mental illness in the context of people that have offended in some way. And it's quite variable. For some people, they've offended because of a symptom of their illness, but for a lot of people, they've just become unwell in prison, for example. It's quite varied, but you treat the same spectrum of mental illnesses that you treat in a lot of other areas. It's mostly schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, dementia, anxiety disorders, things like that. but just in a slightly riskier context, I suppose. But actually, those hospitals and those prison environments that you work in are really safe and very controlled.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I mean, I was about to ask you, do you have any fears or apprehensions working in those kinds of environments?
No, not at all, actually. They're really... These hospitals are set up to be therapeutic environments, but at the same time be mindful of the risk. So we predominantly work in hospitals, so they are therapeutic settings. We don't really work in prison, and we, as doctors, it's not our job to think about. It's not our job to think about the morals of right and wrong as to what somebody's done. It's not our job to think about punishment. Our job is purely therapeutic, to try and treat the mental illness in the context of somebody's contact with the law and what their risk is, past, present, and future.
Awesome.
Wow, that's incredible. I never even knew there was a specialty like that. That's wow.
It's recognized. I'm pretty sure it's recognized in the States as well that it happens. But yeah, it's, to me, it's really interesting because you get to do a lot of medical legal work with it. So you have to have a really good idea of the law. And the other thing you get the chance to do is advocate for human rights. And I think that's really nice, because I think in society, I think we live in a multiple tiered society, don't we, really? And I think that some of our most vulnerable people get forgotten about, and I think people in prison are some of the most psychologically vulnerable people that we have. I think, the same thing goes with the homeless population as well. They're one of the most psychologically vulnerable people in society that we've got, and we're not very good at looking after them. And I'm a big believer in rehabilitation. The mind can be rehabilitated, people can be rehabilitated even if they've done wrong, and I think that you've got a chance to do that, really. And like I said, we treat illness in hospital because it's treatable. And that's the context. That's the context with which our job works. If it wasn't treatable, we wouldn't be treating it. There'd be no role for a doctor, really.
That's so heartwarming and amazing that you said that, because I love how you're going to medicine for the right reasons. Because when we went to school, there were so many people who just said, oh, 6 years, 6 figures, and they would just do it for the money. And that, for me, that wasn't a great way to live life. And I'm so happy to hear that you did medicine for all the right reasons.
You can make 6 figures much more quickly if you go into other areas of like banking and all other sorts of things like that, which don't have anywhere near the amount of exams and don't have to get into anywhere near the amount of debt that you have to get into with med school. So if it's just the money that you want, there's quicker and easier ways to do it. But you're right, you do get some people that are pressured into going into it. Especially for us in the UK, if you want to go straight to med school from school, then you have to decide pretty early on at school that medicine is what you want to do, so that you choose the right subjects in your last few years at school and you get the right grades to get into the right med school. So you end up, for me, if I was to do that, I would have had to chosen the idea of doing medicine when I was 15. I had no idea what I wanted to do at 15. Absolutely none whatsoever. And I think that pressure is absolutely enormous, but some people do. And some of those people end up regretting it. And once you've done a medical degree, you almost feel like you've lost a window of opportunity to learn any other skills. Medicine becomes all you know, and you kind of end up feeling a bit trapped. But for me, because I did the biomedicine degree first, I was 21 when I decided to go into med school, and I felt in a much more mature place to make that decision that medicine is what I wanted to do, and I was going to commit, because it is committing a lifetime career to that one thing.
Definitely, it's definitely a lifetime. So let's say you were back when you were 15 or 21 and you weren't going to go pursue medicine. What would you be doing, and why would you be doing it?
So when I was really young, not when I was 15 or 21, when I was really young, I wanted to be either a pilot or a Power Ranger. The Blue Ranger, actually, not even the Red Ranger. I wasn't very ambitious as a kid. Really, I should have wanted to be the Red Ranger. But I think the ship even had sailed at that when I was 21, let alone 31. I would say probably something like law, which might be a boring answer given that I'm doing forensic psych. But it would allow me to channel my argumentative side in the guise of it being work. And again, it's about advocacy for human rights. There's puzzles. I like a puzzle because medicine, for the most part, is figuring out puzzles, and you get to advocate for human rights within that. And I that's something that I feel quite strongly about. Or Power Ranger as well. Can you be a lawyer and a Power Ranger?
You can be both, I think.
That'd be really interesting.
Wait, so you said Power Rangers. Which series? Because I used to watch that a lot too. Because I know there was like the one with the animals.
Mighty
right?
Morphin Power Rangers.
The original.
Was the only one.
The OG.
Original. I know I'm showing my age now, aren't I? Really? But that was the only one I ever watched. But yeah, I wanted to be the Blue Ranger. I was really not hugely ambitious. I think I was tempering my ambitions.
Yeah. All right, so we're now at the segment of the show we like to call Past, Present, and Future, where we're going to be exploring 3 different periods of your life. So, how do you see yourself now, and how does this compare to the person you were 5 years ago?
I think I see myself as clearer as to who I am. And I don't think I quite knew that was something that was kind of a battle that was going on for the last few years until recently. I think if you look 5 years ago, I was still probably figuring out who I am. I think I was in a position of finishing med school, very, very, very work driven and work orientated, probably defining myself a bit too much by the job that I do. And I'm probably over the last few years just started to be a little bit more comfortable in my own skin and seeing work now. I think this is a healthy thing as a part of my life. It's a part of my life that I'm very, very passionate about, but it is part of my life. It's not something that defines me. And I think that's a really healthy thing to have, because otherwise I think when you feel too invested and it defines you, if you lose it, what else do you have? And I also think it's a one-way road to burnout as well. In terms of in 5 years, career-wise, I'll have even more flexibility, I hope, because that's one of the benefits of rising the ranks. You have even more flexibility. But I'm hoping to be at a point where it's not just about accepting who I am, but hopefully doing something positive to contribute and sort of advocate a little bit more. So one of the things I'm very passionate about is about LGBT stuff to do with mental health. And that's been a big internal battle in terms of developing my own comfort with that and my own sense of self-identity. And I think now I'm at the point where hopefully I can start being a bit more vocal about that and using a platform to try and help others and make things a little bit better.
So you mentioned a lot of important things in what you just said, and what stood out for me was how you said that you're, the job defining who you are, and what if you lost that, and who would you become? So that, I wanted to ask you, so who are you outside of medicine? How would you define it yourself? Like, who is Dr. Elliott Carthy?
A sarcastic kid who likes to go to the pub and watch too much football.
Wait, question. When you say football, do you mean soccer or do you mean like American football?
Soccer, but foot plus ball is football. Not picking up the ball and running with it. That's like a glorified version of rugby. Except your lot wear more padding than the rugby players do. So yeah, I think work is something I'm very, very passionate about, but it's I'm trying not to let it overrun things and define things. And I'm at a point now where I'm able to pick and choose the bits that I want to do, and try and think about how I can incorporate my other passions into work and vice versa. Because you want to be able to do some bits that don't really feel like work, even if they are doing it and you're earning a bit of money and stuff for it. And that's where I'm trying to take some of the LGBT stuff that I'm doing and incorporate that into work and vice versa. I'm not quite sure how that's going to go yet and how that's panning out, but that's sort of a work in progress really with things. But then that's really cut down to probably the last couple of years, getting a bit more comfortable in my own skin, and understanding that a bit more. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do in terms of advocacy is be happy with who you are and just be present and be open and be visible.
Completely.
Yeah. I remember in one of your videos you'd said that I think you were going to go to one of those Pride events, but then COVID got everything shut down.
Yeah, that was last year. Yeah, last year. That was going to be, again, because I've sort of this journey of self-acceptance. I'd kind of been avoiding Pride a little bit. I wasn't quite sure why. But then last year I was really up for going. Really, really up for going. And then Miss Roan has come along and thrown shade all over the world and everything has gone kaput. And yeah, so I'm hoping maybe this year, if all the restrictions get lessened, which the plan is that they are, and that Pride is going to go ahead. So I'm hoping I get to go this year. I think there's like about 10 Prides happening in the UK, all in the space of like a few weeks. They're all being crammed into as soon as the lockdown restrictions are over, and everybody's gonna basically like be doing tours around the country of every single Pride event, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I know we have a lot of Pride events here in New York City. I know there's a huge parade and everyone's just so outgoing in June.
Yeah, it's a celebration really, and I think the wonderful thing, and I think we're trying to move towards this idea, and at least this is what I'm trying to do with some of the LGBT stuff that I'm doing, is think about not just anti-discrimination stuff and how can we bring queer people onto the same level as straight people and cis people, but actually what value do queer people actively add to society, and let's start seeing this as a positive thing. And I think we need to reframe that with a lot of different things, people, groups that are marginalized as well. There's actually value people can add, and we need to focus not just on what people need but what value they can add to society as a whole. And I think Pride's just a wonderful celebration of that.
So when you say value, what do you mean by that? Do you mean as in their identity, or like in the works that they can bring to society, how they can contribute to the overall well-being of everyone?
All the above. All the above. I think that any group of people that have been othered in any way and marginalized in that way and made to experience varying degrees of shame and things like that, and there's so many groups of people that have that experience that, they have life experiences that other people don't necessarily have. It requires a sense of strength that other people might not realize is there, and I think through that there's a lot of value that can be added, and I think that's what we need to be recognized. It's not just about focusing on what people need, but what value can people add, and I think that's really important.
And I think this is a perfect segue to our next question. Which principles, or what principles rather, do you live your life by?
The hard work pays off. I always ask why, and that can irritate people, but I always ask why. And I think it can sniff out nonsense when someone's asking you to do something that actually has no justification at all. When you ask why, they go, you know, it's nonsense. But it also means I can learn, and everything is about learning. And for example, the YouTube stuff that I'm trying to do as well, it's as much about forming a dialogue and me learning rather than me professing to be some sort of expert. I really want to be able to learn from people that I speak to. But I also think from a career point of view, it stops me taking on too much. It's one of the things that stops me taking on and letting work run my life. If I always ask, why am I doing this? And what's the benefit from this? Then it stops me taking on stuff that I'm doing just because I feel a social obligation to take on, which, you know, nobody really needs to do. And you think about, what is this going to add either to me or to somebody else or to something else? And I think that's important. And I think the old cliche of do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, not because and the what goes around comes around thing, not because I believe in, I don't have any sort of spiritual side to me, and I don't believe in karma as such. But I just think morally, for me, that just seems like the right thing to do.
I love how you said always asking why. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that that's how they live their life by. I mean, did you ask yourself why when we asked you to be on the show?
Yeah, I did. And for me, that it was flattering that anybody was interested in what I have to say. But for me, one of the best things about starting out on YouTube, and it's the channel starting to grow, is meeting interesting people and having these sorts of conversations and me learning from it and trying to get different perspectives from people. So yeah, I did, and I'm still here.
Well, we're happy you're here. Have you ever asked why to like a superior or to someone who's managing you? Because I know you said that the why, that's how you sniff out the BS in some things that people tell you. Yes,
with varying responses. So sometimes, especially, so for example, with clinical stuff, if it's a clinical decision and you're asking your boss for advice on what to do and things like that, and you're asking why they're doing something, most consultants are pretty forthcoming. They'll explain their rationale, because that way you learn, and that's how you grow and you train and you become a better doctor. But then there's sometimes that, like any job in any workplace, there's stuff you just got to do because the boss wants it done, and you just got to do what the boss says because they're the boss. And sometimes you ask why and you get a clear rationale of why they want it done, and sometimes you get the, you know, just get on with it and do it, and you have to accept it a little bit because they're the boss. But outside of that, with like the YouTube stuff and outside of that hierarchical setting, asking why means I get to sort of pick and choose, I suppose, what I do.
I really love that philosophy. So I guess so how did you end up starting your YouTube channel? What inspired you to do that?
I think that information sharing has moved to social media, and I think that the academic part of me likes the idea of textbooks and journal articles and publications and things like that. But in reality, that is about communicating with your colleagues. And a lot of these journal articles are hidden behind paywalls and stuff that people can't access. And there's all politics and money that goes with that. If you want to speak and if you want to inform the general public and help improve their knowledge about stuff that you know about, social media is the place to be. There's no point writing it in a textbook because nobody that you really want to read it is going to read it. They're not. And I think medicine is a little bit behind the curve with that. Now, I think if you go on places like YouTube, there was stuff on there on like general internal medicine and surgery and things like that. People have done channels on that already. There's some really good stuff out there. There was nothing on psychiatry and nothing on mental illness. And there's a lot of pseudoscience, a lot of people with opinions on there masquerading as fact that isn't really true. And there's some anti-psychiatry voices out there that don't really like us. But it wasn't being countered with anything evidence-based. And I also think that we're doing a lot of mental health awareness stuff and talking about mental health, but we're not talking about mental illness, and there's a difference. So we're talking about how to promote our mental health with, exercise and all of those types of things, just in the same way that we promote our physical health with good diet and exercise and things like that. But talking about your physical health with diet and exercise isn't the same as talking about diabetes or heart failure or pancreatitis or inflammatory bowel disease, just in the same way that talking about, doing stuff to help your mental health and deal with day-to-day sadness and worry isn't the same as talking about depression or anxiety disorders or schizophrenia, and I think we stop short still by talking about what the reality of mental illness is like, rather than just optimizing mental health. And I hope that's really what I try to do. And I love teaching. And at its core, a lot of clinical work and teaching and YouTube stuff. And just like what we're doing here, it's all storytelling. It's all storytelling. It's all about what's the message, how can you structure your story with a good beginning, middle, and end, who's your target audience that tells you how to communicate that and explain it, and don't overload people. And I think that storytelling principle is unanimous with all of these things. And I just thought, well, if no one else is doing it and I want to see it, why didn't I just try it and see? And if I don't like it, if no one watches it, I take it down and nothing's lost. But if you don't try it, you never really know. And I really only probably in the middle of last year started being very consistent with it. And then in the last couple of months, it started to grow quite nicely, which is great. And people are seeing it and the feedback is pretty good and people are enjoying it. And as long as people enjoy it, I enjoy it, I'm hopefully going to keep doing it.
Well, I love your content. I watched the one with your reaction to the Simpsons. That was really good. I mean, do you have any influences from other doctors who are using social media as a platform to educate? I mean, we have people like Dr. Pimple Popper, like people like Dr. Mike.
I love Dr. Mike's channel. I love Dr. Mike. I think Dr. Mike is I think is really good, and I think he showed how good he can use his platform with the COVID stuff as well. And I think he really used it to share proper, good evidence-based stuff and counter a lot of pseudoscience and anti-vax stuff. So I think he really showed that you get a lot of doctors that go on TV and go to the media, and then they start making some money and they sell their soul based on whatever's going to be the most profitable. All right. So you get people on TV that do those types of things, and that happens in the UK as well. But Dr. Mike, I respect because he's kept to his principles. And he's kept to evidence-based stuff, and he's not selling his soul for sponsorships and things like that. And he's got a good variety of content, so I like that. There's actually a non-medical channel, Legal Eagle, is really good. So he's brilliant. He's a lawyer that, again, to me, he's kind of the Dr. Mike of law, really, on YouTube. And again, he's got some brilliant, very, very, very informative stuff, but then some lighter stuff with reaction videos as well. There's so many out there. We've got a UK cardiologist called his channel's called Medlife Crisis. His is really, really good. So I've got quite a lot of people that I think are really interesting that I look up to with this. The reason that I did reaction videos, and those are what people have clicked with, is again, I found when I meet patients that actually they don't really often understand what a psychiatrist does nowadays, or their view about what a psychiatrist does is based on what happened in the 70s, the 80s, out of date treatments when perhaps psychiatry's ethics wasn't quite what they are today. And that can make people quite fearful of us. But also I know that a fundamental part of people's mental illness sometimes can be they're not often very sure of what they're thinking or what they're feeling. And that seems like a really bizarre thing, to feel something but not really know what that feeling is, or to think something or not really understand what it is, and have all this fog in your mind that creates that causes this lack of clarity of your own thoughts and your feelings. And so people go out seeking clarity, and they connect with different things. You might connect with song lyrics, for example, but often people connect with characters on TV shows about how they're feeling, and that helps them understand how they're feeling. And that connection can also mean if something big happens, that can affect them quite a lot. So I had a few patients that the impetus for going and seeking help was the death of Chester Bennington a few years ago, and he died by suicide. I saw a few people, and that was their impetus for seeking help. And you realize how much people connect with these types of art forms. And if that's where they're going for clarity, then I'm going to meet them there and make sure that if their understanding of that is based on evidence, really, and based on accuracy.
And that's a really good thing to have, like, a lot of evidence-based stuff, especially with the way the internet's working. And then we have, our younger generation with such high rates of anxiety and depression. And in fact, people are so quick to just call themselves depressed. And I think that's especially come up with, like, having certain types of celebrities and singers like Billie Eilish, who've sort of popularized that kind of effect. So it's really good, the work that you're doing, and then the work that, like, especially to have evidence-based channels.
I think there is a bit of a medicalizing of emotions happening, in that there's some people that there is, this is a consequence of the mental health awareness stuff, isn't it? That a lot of the time people aren't worried anymore, they have anxiety, or they're not sad anymore, they are depressed. And actually the disorders of anxiety disorders and depressive disorders are quite different to sadness and to worry. But actually the other thing is that the other argument is that people are just more open about having these mental illnesses, not channeling their anxiety into a bottle of drink anymore. That maybe was what was done decades gone by. So I don't know if I'm completely convinced that the prevalence of a lot of these mental illnesses has changed, but I think our outlets for them and the way that we're becoming aware of them and our insight into our own mental health and to mental illness has changed. And I think that's for the better, but we just need to make sure that from a professional's point of view, our services and our resources for giving people help are going up, just as the mental health awareness campaigns go up. Okay, awareness is great, but we're now just aware of a problem that actually there isn't the resources to fix. So then people are left struggling. And so we need to make sure that we're doing both of those things.
Agreed. They should definitely come hand in hand, those two.
So in life, with the way the world is moving, COVID has turned everything upside down, and then there's just so much going on in the world. What would you say that you're grateful for?
Opportunity. And I say that as a gay man predominantly. And this is part of the journey towards the old self-acceptance thing that I was speaking about. I think probably one of my sort of epiphany moments for this sort of self-acceptance was a couple of years ago in New York, actually. I was there and we were wandering around, and we ended up in the village, and then we ended up just walking past Stonewall, not planning to, but we just ended up there. And I went, oh, hang on, wow. And then we went in for a drink, and then just a little light bulb moment happened where I went, blimey, just think of what actually happened here, 50 years ago. And all the stuff, what life was like before, what life was like after that. And what happened here to give me the opportunity to not necessarily be held back by my sexuality. And to have the opportunity to thrive and to not have actually experienced much in the way of discrimination, that was a powerful moment for me. And I think that's probably the thing I'm most grateful for is opportunity.
That's so powerful. It's just one word, but that's a really powerful statement.
Well, I think not people. There's a lot of people that still lack the opportunity, and we see that with so many different walks of life at the moment, that there is opportunity lacking for so many people. I've been fortunate to have opportunity, and for me that was a big moment of realizing it, really, of what opportunity I've had, and to start not taking it for granted anymore, really.
Amazing. So we're now at the part of the show where we actually get our title from Time Capsule. This is a really tough one, so I hope you're ready for it. But if you were to leave something in a time capsule for people to dig up 100 years later, what would you put in there and why?
And we can just pretend that it's all going to survive fully intact and things like that for 100 years.
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about materials and self-preservation and all that stuff.
You can put food in it if you want. I don't think it'll spoil.
No, I'm not going to put food in it. I think I'd write a letter. I can't think of a single object that I would put in. I'd write a letter. And I think I'd write a letter, and I think it would be focused on the idea of trying to encourage some self-compassion in people. Because I think if we look past through the generations, we look through history, and we look through the present, we look at so much in the way of conflicts, local conflict, national conflicts, international conflicts. At the root of a lot of conflicts is people's unhappiness and people's misunderstanding of other cultures and other people, and people confronting each other, not conversing with each other. And I think it all kind of starts with self-compassion. If you are compassionate towards yourself and you learn to accept yourself and figure out who on earth you are, then when you do that, you can then show that same compassion to other people, develop empathy, reduce your ignorance. And I think with that, you converse and you stop confronting. And I think everybody wins with that. And it seems a little bit maybe grandiose me saying that in a letter. I'm not expecting world peace to happen with something like that, but I think that's a fundamental aspect of being human and something I'm trying to do for myself, and I think that other people hopefully can benefit from.
Well said. And I agree with you. I think that compassion is something that we see lost in society. People get distracted with so much noise and they become selfish. I think we've seen a lot of selfishness in society, whether it's within political figures or just with people we know in our daily lives. And I think compassion is something that we can all relate to and that we can all practice in all of our lives.
And I think we focus, when we talk about compassion, we always say, be kind to other people, and that's important. But it starts with, what does RuPaul say? If you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? And it's exactly right. And it starts with being compassionate to yourself and self-acceptance. And I think then with that, compassion towards other people just comes very, very naturally.
Yeah, that's very true. Right. Is there anything else you'd like to have? Do you have any final words of advice for our viewers?
Oh, blimey. Thank you just so much for having me on. And I think this chat has been really, really interesting. Have a look at the YouTube channel, especially if you're interested in anything to do with mental health and mental illness. And yeah, hopefully everybody is keeping well with the end of COVID stuff. And I think with COVID, my biggest advice from a mental health point of view with this is try and focus on the moment, really. Try not to worry too much about the future. There's a lot of stuff in the news about, new variants and things like that. Try not to worry about too much about the future. We don't have control over that, really. Keep yourself safe. Don't feel pressured into doing lots of social stuff if you don't really want to, just because you can. Yeah, just try and enjoy the moment.
And where can people find you on social media?
So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Carthy, ELCARTHY. I'm on Instagram at dr.elliott.carthy, and I'm on YouTube as well. You can just put my name in the search thing, Dr. Elliott Carthy, and you'll probably find me.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Elliott, thank you so much for being a part of our time capsule, and thank you to our viewers for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tune in again next week to meet another amazing addition to our time capsule. See you guys next time.